Okay, I think we're live for our 75th installment of Office Hours. We've got a special edition today. We're going to be going through our recent report on the collapse of UST. So, GM everyone, thank you for joining us. Drop your GMs in the chat. So, with me today, I'm very lucky to be talking to some of the team behind this report, and they're going to be explaining the methodology, the reasons behind the report, and then the conclusions that they came to. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat as well. We'll try and answer them if we can. So before we start, if you're new to Office Hours, every Wednesday we do a Nansen and Chill session. We'll have different guests on. We're going to be looking at new features, answering questions, providing alpha leaks. Obviously, this one is a bit of a unique episode. We're going to be going through a report. I'm sure we'll do more stuff like that in the future. So make sure to subscribe, turn your notifications on so you won't miss any future alpha. And if you'd like to try Nansen, you can do that for free. Just use the link below and you can sign up to Nansen Lite. So I think we will kick things off. We're going to be talking to Yongli first about why we kind of decided to investigate the UST DPEG in the first place. So
All right, thanks, Alex. Yeah, so we decided to investigate this UST DPEG because we noticed that many people are actually discussing this malicious attacker narrative on social media platforms that we see, such as Twitter. So we wanted to use, I would say, our very unique position as a top blockchain analytics platform with millions of wallet labels on Ethereum and Terra to actually verify if this narrative is true. And we felt that this was really important to us because we wanted to figure out what actually happened so that we could educate the public or investors and hopefully prevent similar occurrences from happening in the future. Yeah.
Okay. So I think I wanted to ask Louisa, how did you approach this analysis? So there was a lot of possibilities and assumptions on social media, a lot of data to scan. So how did you start off? What was your initial approach?
Yeah, so as Yongli mentioned, there was definitely a lot of noise on social media platform. You hear many different forms of narratives. So we wanted to sort of have a more rigorous and objective approach to our analysis and like what Yongli mentioned, really leverage what we have, which is the on-chain data. So we use this approach called grounded theory to actually sort out all of the social media, Twitter threads, for example. And then from there, we identify a few key themes that help to sort of inform our direction or the sequence in which how we will carry out this analysis. So it's really in like 3 phases. So the first one was really focusing on the transaction flows in and out of the Curve lending protocol. And then from there, we compiled a list of potential wallet addresses that whose transaction event actually have an impact or make a likely impact on the depegging of USD. And then simultaneously, we actually have the second phase of the analysis where we observe any transactions across the wormhole bridge that could have led to this depeg. We also look at the outflows of UST from Anchor protocol involving this list of suspected wallet addresses. And then we also have investigated the sale of UST and USDC on centralized exchanges. That's also related to these lists of addresses. In the final phase of the analysis, what we did was, because we had so many data points, we actually triangulated just to add more rigor to what we're doing. And then from there, we try to piece together the relevant activities and formulate a narrative and try to sort of either affirm or if not reject some of the online narratives.
Okay, so I think we wanted to get some more details on like what happened exactly on Curve. So I think Aurelie's the kind of expert on this part. So if you're ready to show.
Yes, absolutely. So as Louisa mentioned, so everything started on Ethereum. Paradoxically, everything started on Curve. We gathered that because we put together credible sources from social media, from articles, and everything seemed to converge to Curve and the really fast depletion in liquidity that we saw from 7th of May to 10th of May. So what we did is we used Nansen data for that. And because, as my colleagues mentioned, it's a lot of data, we thought, okay, can we really isolate the time zone that interests us? So namely, just before the DPEG, not really the panic that followed really the news of the DPEG, but really were there some wallets, were there some investors that really started to interact with Flow before the DPEG. So what we did is we looked at the candle charts, and you can see we investigated essentially this first leg. So it all took place in the nights of the 7th of May, around after 9:30 p.m. To early in the morning in the 8th of May. And you can see a tweet from Do Kwon on the 8th of May, where actually there are initial news that there is an issue with the peg, that the peg is being challenged. And this is really around 8th of May, 1 a.m. CET. So it's 7th of May, 11 p.m. UTC. So if we look at Nansen data, and we proceed the inflows and the outflows out of curve, so not only the third pool, but also the fourth pool, the meme pool. So there are a lot of different entities that are related to UST. What we can observe is that there are a lot of erratic flows. It's not something that we could see before that time period. You have some jumps from 100 million up and then 100 million down, and then a little bit up and down. And what we did basically is we consulted Nansen, and we could see basically that these jumps, just a very few number of wallets were responsible for those. So we just really had a look at those wallets and started to put together, as Louisa said, a list of quote-unquote suspect wallets. So this comes directly from Nansen query. So you could see the first flow that really is really interesting is this 150 million outflow of UST from Curve. And you can see it's related to the Luna Foundation. Just after that flow, that's where really what we call the quote-unquote the battle of the curve started. You started to have a few massive inflows. The biggest one was from this wallet, 85 million. It ends in D0A. We will talk a little bit about it a little bit further in this call, because it's a wallet that we could identify interacting with Anchor, interacting with bridges. So we will talk a little bit more about this wallet. So, okay, 85 million in Curve, and then from this wallet, and then we have basically just inflows of 5 to 10 millions. The next big inflow is 25 million, and it comes from this wallet that ends in 81C. And we have our attribution team, Philip from our attribution team, identified this one as belonging to the investor Celsius. So, so if we go back to the report, this period is very agitated. So the Luna Foundation starts to withdraw UST, and then you have a few investors, 3, 4, who put UST, and vice versa. So that continues in a way that's alternatively until 8th of May early morning. And you can see all of these wallets that were very initially interacting with Curve. So we just flagged them. And what's interesting to say maybe for that is that most of this UST initially was swapped versus USDC. So that was the currency or the stablecoin that was more in demand. And then as we got further in the morning on 8th of May, there was some switch for also USDT and DAI also. But the more requested one, quote unquote, at the beginning was USDC. So what we did is, okay, this was the timeline, and this is the timing, and this is who interacted early with Curve. And then we wanted a bit of a more quantitative vision, and we just grabbed 7th of May, 8th of May, and tried to figure out, okay, this same wallet overall had a big impact in terms of aggregate flows. And what we found is that, yes, it's the case. So you can see again Celsius here. You can see our mystery wallet, the one responsible for the 85 million is here. And then you can see a bunch of aggregated flows that went through 1inch, which is an aggregator. And then if you look at 1inch, we just did another analysis, who sent to 1inch at that same time. We have also a number of other wallets, suspect wallets that come up. So Mask NFT, we will talk about it later, HS0327. And then we have Oapital, which interacted a bit later. So so we have a few names and a few wallets appearing as part of the curve analysis. So the summary is that there were early wallets and very few interacting in sizable amounts with curve, mostly swapping UST for USDC. That's where we started our inquiry, our investigation.
Yeah, and then I think we wanted to have a look at the kind of anchor activity because that played a big part. So I think, Louisa, you're on for this part.
Yeah, so the reason, I guess, the motivation behind looking at the anchor outflow was we wanted to get a gauge of whether or not this attack was sudden or was it actually bubbling and then it kind of erupted or hit a sort of a turning point that speed things up. So what we did was using the list of suspected addresses, we actually tried to monitor what was their outflow like. And what was interesting, we found, was between the DPEG event, which we have defined as between 7 and 10 May, we observed that these wallets actually had an outflow of about 347 million UST, and that was made through 8 the wallet with the greatest outflow, had about $347 million UST that was actually completed through 8 transactions. And in total, when we look at the number of greatest net outflows from the top 20 addresses, there was a cumulative withdrawal of about 2 billion UST from Anchor. And that was done through about slightly over 5,000 transactions. When we zoom in a little bit deeper on the outflows from Anchor, what we found was there was recurring theme on who were really which wallets were having the most withdrawal, and also they were also the wallets that were actually breached through the wormhole. So the 2 main wallet that we identified that was quite that sort of came out in the different data points with the wormhole and also Anchor withdrawal was wallet A and wallet B. So these 2 wallets which was on our list. And I think wallet A, as Aurelie has mentioned, we'll probably expand that a little bit more because we have some information on that later on as we dig even deeper. So what we found was these 2 wallets, wallet A and wallet B, with wallet B being actually related to Celsius. The 2 identified wallets actually initiated significant outflow volume from the Anchor protocol during the DPEG event. And I think between these 2 wallets, you're looking at about 420 million of UST across 15 transactions. But what was also interesting and caught our attention was wallet H here. And that's because wallet H was it actually had the most number of transaction volume prior to the DPEG event. But then, during the DPEG event, its activity actually slowed down. So from a behavioral sort of analysis point of view, we thought it was interesting. It was as though this wallet had somewhat prepared or preempt, what might come, and actually had that significant outflow ready before the DPEG event. What was also an interesting insight was when we look at the outflows from Anchor, it seems that some of the outflows started as early as mid-April. In fact, quite a significant amount was actually done prior to the DPEG event.
Okay, wow. I thought we'd touch more on the kind of irregularities on that bridge from Terra to ETH, like kind of the wallets that stood out. So if we could get more detail from Aurelie, that would be great.
Yeah, so the bridge analysis, what's interesting with it is it allows us to, so far we were on Ethereum, and with Anchor we are on Terra, and with the bridge analysis you can find quote unquote sister address, so on Ethereum and Terra. And what we found, as Louisa said, is two things. So there was, in terms of timing, there was a really strong bridging activity on the 7th and 8th of May, a jump. And then if we look at this bridging activity, so we selected May 5 to May 8 a little bit before, just in case these wallets would have bridged before. We find again a high concentration. So we estimate that the top wallets are responsible for a bit less than 60% of the bridging of UST over that time period. And if we look at, again, the names of these wallets, it's very familiar. It's what Louisa has showed you a little bit before. So this would be the wallet A and wallet B that we talked about before. This would be the 2R7. This would be wallet, I think, D1, or it's Mask NFT. And then there is another one, Token Millionaire, which is here, which we will talk a little bit before. So the same wallets that actually started really interacting with Curve before the 8th of May in the morning also withdrew flows from Anchor as early as April, but definitely also from 5th and 8th of May. And yeah, so that's and then they interacted on Ethereum on various protocol Curve, but also centralized exchange, and we can talk about that later. But if we look now at this quote-unquote wallets that we flagged, maybe we take the first two, A and B, which both started early and really were responsible for strong inflows into Curve. And we can take another one, H. So A is, we couldn't label it as Nansen because it was a wallet that was created very recently, as early as May 2022. So it seems that it's a wallet that was created for this explicit purpose of interacting with Curve on regarding UST. So what we found on this wallet is the following. So there was early bridging as early as May 7th from Terra. So if we have a look, if we kind of have a look at the wallet profiler of Nansen, you can see the interactions here. So you can see here basically that this wallet receiving the amount from Wormhole, and then just kind of putting it into Curve, into the Curve protocol. So you can see basically these two big transactions, and then after that, you can see this wallet stopped interacting. So after May 9th and before May 7th, there were no interactions. So that was interesting. Maybe what we can say around this wallet, we started trying to label it and to identify it. The only element that was interesting for this wallet, as you can see, little activity, was the NFT holding. And we were kind of hoping that by publishing and putting it out there, maybe there would be more information coming from outside. So there is one holding of NFT called Literally Trash. It's a collection that is produced by this counterparty. And we found out that this counterparty is involved in quite a lot of wash trading also in parallel. So that could be maybe an initial clue on that one. So just something that we found. We didn't really go further on the trail, so we didn't really go into detail in the report.
Okay.
On the other wallet, so the second one was we managed to label it, so it was associated with Celsius. And here again, we had massive bridging from Terra, and before that also interactions basically with Anchor also as early as late April. So this wallet started to withdraw UST from Anchor as early as late April. And then later, around May 7th, there was bridgings of 175 million UST from Terra to Ethereum. If we can go again to the wallet profiler, maybe we can see that a bit more clearly. Yeah, so that's the wallet 81C, you can see, associated with With Celsius, you can see basically this is another wallet that is associated with Celsius. And this other wallet is sending 175 million to our quote-unquote suspect wallet. And then you can see a little bit later on 7th of May and then 8th of May, we start to have kind of sending of USD to Curve by amounts of 25 million. So all of this amount is being swapped mostly versus USDC. Maybe we zoom in on another wallet that is also interesting. I think Luisa was mentioning it because it interacted with Anchor super early. So the last trade was, I think, 1st of May. Let me go to this one. Yeah, that's wallet F. So we label it a token millionaire heavy dex trader. We don't have a lot more info, but I will talk a little bit about some clues after that. So let's go again to the Nansen wallet profiler for that one. Yeah, you can see C69 interaction with UST. Yeah, so this one is interesting also because it didn't have so many interactions with UST, just on May 7th and May 8th. And then you can see basically here the different, what's happening is that this wallet receives money from Terra, so this is 5 million, and then switches it to swap it on Curve. Receiving, swapping, receiving, swapping. And all, you remember our time frame at the beginning, very early also on the nights of May 7 and on the morning of May 8. So this wallet, quote-unquote token millionaire and heavy dex trader, also responsible for between 30 and 40 million of swapping on Curve. Now, who is that? So if we try to figure out who that is, we can use the past interaction of this wallet with other wallets on Nansen. And what we find is that there are quite a lot of interaction with Alpha Finance Lab. So that's maybe also a clue as to the identity of this wallet. So yeah, basically to summarize, by bridging, we saw that the addresses that were really active on Curve started to withdraw money from Anchor very early, so as early as April 2022. And then the bridging occurred after Anchor withdrawal, mostly around May 7th, May 8th. And then there was directly swapping to Curve. And then we could get one identity clear out of these addresses, so Celsius. The other one, we have a clue as regard to this NFT that I was telling you about. And then there's another one that interacted with Alpha Finance. So that's 3 examples, but in the report, we go into details for other addresses.
Yeah, I think people will probably have questions like about the kind of how they all interacted at the same time. Maybe people feel like they kind of work together. So maybe we can ask that at the end. But for now, I think we want to see like the role that central exchanges played in this DPEG. And I think Yongli is going to give some answers.
Yeah, okay, so for centralized exchanges, our labels actually showed about 225 million net inflows into these CEXs from 1st of May to 20th of May. As you can see with the inflow concentrated beginning from the 9th of May to 10th of May. So based on these dates, we do not believe that the selling pressure on these CEXs actually started the depegging process per se, but more of dealing like the final blow. As you can see that the net inflows subsequently just increased all the way after 9th of May. So during our investigations, we also cross-referenced some of the top wallets that we have that deposited UST into these centralized exchanges, as well as with the wallets that swapped UST early on via the curve pools. So, finding the top depositors on this centralized exchange was really easy with Nansen. For example, what we did was we used token movements. We can see the top transactions in the period. And you can see that Hodlnaut was one of the key offloaders in FTX. Over here, we can see that Hodlnaut actually dumped about 121 million on FTX using this wallet. Subsequently, they also used the same wallet to dump about 50 million UST on FTX as well. So based on analysis, we also eventually flagged a few interesting wallets whereby they were either early curve UST swappers or top depositor of UST into CEXs. And these wallets are Hodlnaut, Mars NFT, Oapital, and Wonderland DAO, which was previously mentioned by Aurelie and Luisa. But we actually leave out Wonderland DAO as they were actually liquidating their Abracadabra degen box and these wallets, likely exited some of their UST positions via Curve or centralized exchanges, right? Given that the majority of the early Curve swappers had swapped to UST for USDC from the Curve pools, as mentioned by Aurelie earlier. We also examined the top USDC depositors on these centralized exchanges as well. And alas, we managed to see familiar names like Mars NFT and OEPITO. So we also noted that this wallet labeled Curve Initiator was the address that arguably started the whole series of events by swapping 85 million UST on May 7 for about 84.5 million USDC. And using the same Nansen wallet pair profiler, we could eventually see that they actually dumped this USDC on Coinbase soon after. However, looking at net inflows to centralized exchange wasn't really the best way to tell it. So we decided to look at the specific USD flow activity among the flag wallets to basically better understand their intentions. So to keep this short, we'll actually focus on just two of the flag wallets. So firstly, let's take a look at Mars NFT.eth, which had a net a net outflow of about 77 million UST to CEXs. So on the 8th of May, we could see that this wallet actually transferred about 11.9 million UST from Binance and swapped it to MIM on the Curve MIM UST pool. You can see that they receive tokens from Binance, dump it on Curve, receive, dump it, and subsequently so on. So while we could not really confirm whether these transfers were arbitrage opportunities, but a good guess is, this wallet could have purchased UST on Binance the day earlier during the DPEG, where UST hit a low of about 0.985 and sold it for a profit on Curve the next day when the peg managed to briefly recover. Right. Soon after, the wallet then started purchasing an estimated about 97 million from Curve routed from 1inch, and then subsequently dumped it on Binance, right? So you might be wondering, how did we actually know that the UST were coming from Curve? So we used the same wallet profiler for token. We noticed that this wallet was basically purchasing UST from 1inch, and you can see that it was actually routed to Curve. And whenever they bought the UST from 1inch, they basically swapped the wormhole UST for wrapped UST and proceeded to dump it on Binance. Right, moving on, let's take a look at another wallet that we labeled as OEPITO. So similarly, this wallet had a net outflow of about 57 million into centralized exchanges, but OEPITO activities were much more varied, as you can see, in the large amounts on different directional flows. But to keep it simple, we won't actually delve into the specifics, right, of how we tabulated the numbers, but we just gave the numbers for reference. So as you can see, there was some significant selling pressure on FTX, on Binance, but majority of it is actually on Binance. However, what is really interesting about this OEPITO is definitely the kind of profits that it made through its arbitrage trades. So let's take a look at some of its transactions. So this is the first transaction. It was done on 9th of May, 9 p.m. UTC. You could see that this wallet basically swapped about 1 million UST for equivalent in USDC. And assuming that the estimated value on day of transfer is the cost of UST for this OEPITO trader, you can see that he basically made about 132,000 USDC worth of profits. Likewise, he made multiple transactions. Another transaction here is he traded about 2 million UST for 2 million worth of USDC. And if the cost is accurate, he could have walked away with at least 200 USD worth of profits. Yeah, so, but of course, all these values are just estimates because we can't really confirm what are the true costs of UST for OEPITO. Yeah.
Okay, well, so Louisa, what is like the conclusion that we kind of came to? So obviously the initial thoughts was that it was like an attack by one party, or so we've kind of disproved that. But does it also kind of disprove collusion? Does it seem more to you like a opportunistic kind of scenario where they were waiting for this to happen and then kind of all the parties like jumped onto it? What kind of answers did we get from this report?
Yeah, I think what we gather from the on-chain evidence is we kind of refute the narrative of one attacker or hackers actually working to destabilize UST. In fact, I guess what evidence from on-chain activity show us is there is a lot of risk when it comes to stable coins like UST, where they're based on algorithms. So I think that's something that market participants need to take into consideration, for future reference. But what we found instead was a small number of, market players who actually identified and actually arbitraged these vulnerabilities, specifically in relation to the shallow liquidity of the curve pools. That was, vital to the pegging of UST. So just a quick recap of what our analysis showed was, first you had the withdrawal of UST funds from Anchor Protocol Terra. Second, you had this bridging of these funds from Terra to Ethereum via the wormhole infrastructure. We then further tracked and found that there was swapping of significant amounts of UST with other stablecoins in the Curve liquidity pool. And then finally, what we have is that during the depegging process, some of these wallets exploited these inefficiencies between the various pricing sources, such as DEXs or CEXs, and the Curve pool, and then by buying and selling position in the transaction between the DEXs and CEXs. So through triangulating these various data points, we come to sort of compile these 7 initiating wallets. It is likely that the entities behind these wallets may actually be an even smaller pool. But overall, what I guess our main motivation, going back to why we wanted to do this analysis, was to really shed light on what really happened, so that we could either affirm or, if not, refute some of the claim on social media, but also highlight the risks involved, and perhaps use this research piece as a more awareness piece, where users can understand what we can leverage through on-chain data, what users can do, for example, perhaps setting alerts using Nansen, so that they are clued up into what's going on with certain protocol or liquidity pools. So yeah, I think that sums up, but not sure if Aurelie or Yongli would like to add anything to that.
No, absolutely. And as regards to your first question, Alex, on collusion, so yeah, it's an interesting question because there are a bunch of wallets in there that are not really labeled. The main one is the wallets A, so the 85 million guy who started. The question is, who is behind this wallet? What was it? One of these other actors that we could identify, Celsius, HS, etc., or not? So that's a little bit a question. It could be that this short list of 7 that we have here is actually even shorter when we look at the entities. We know that there are a few entities that are distinct. We mentioned Alpha Finance. We mentioned Celsius. We mentioned this one, HS327. It's a wallet that exists since a very long time. So it's unlikely that it was created by an entity just for this exploit. So our guess is that this shortlist maybe shrinks to a few entities. And then one interesting observation that we have is that these entities seem to be professional or related to funds, or so that's why we thought of labeling it more like less like a hacker attack and more like maybe an arbitrage or a trading attack on some vulnerability on Curve. So that was what informed our conclusion.
Yeah, and I think this report just shows like how amazing on-chain data is. I think especially because of like how painful it was for a lot of people. People lost loads of money. I think in these type of situations when you've had like a disaster, basically you're like kind of scrambling for answers and maybe like want to believe the one that gets most popular, which was that it was like a single attacker. So I feel like this report is really effective in like disproving that, and then also showing, I know it's a kind of a shill, but how like powerful Nansen labels are, because we could write this report and show like who each party was to the best of our ability anyway. Some of them you can't, but we wouldn't have been able to do that, at least definitely not as easily, without the Nansen data from Query and also from the dashboards that a lot of people have kind of public access to. So I think that's why it got such a good reception as well, because you could actually start to put like names to wallets, which is like a very difficult thing in this space. And it kind of created like a story of how it played out. And I think it's important, like Louisa said, that from these reports, I know some people feel like, what's the point? Like after it's done, what's the point in going back and looking at it again? But actually, there is so much point in doing these reports because then you can learn from them and hopefully not be in this situation again. There's loads of different types of stablecoins. I think we now know that they're not as safe as we kind of thought they were, or maybe that was just me. But yeah, so I think there's a lot of lessons to take from it, and hopefully this report has been really helpful for that. And I'm sure that we'll have kind of more reports in the future, because inevitably there will be these type of situations again, hopefully not as bad. But yeah, I think it's really powerful. And I just want to say, unless anyone else got anything to say, if you've got questions, put them in the chat. We have got some time, but if not, we will wrap it up. Someone says, what comes to mind is that it's super hard to notice the attack early enough. But you can see that with Nansen data. Some wallets are brand new and not labeled yet. Yeah, I think it is definitely difficult in these situations to kind of spot it early on. Because like, as we saw, it took a long time to even make this report. You have to go across various things. So it's definitely difficult. And then, yeah, Barkin makes a good point. You can set smart alerts to kind of make that easier for yourself. So you'll get notifications when you see these big transfers. Yes, thank you for that. Okay, if there's no other questions though, anyone else got anything to say? I will put an outro in. No?
Yeah, maybe one last point on how to do that, how to spot that earlier. I mean, ideally, there has to be an analysis on stress testing the whole system. So that's something that we're also thinking of before. So before anything happens, in a way. So for me, it just got me thinking about algorithmic stablecoin versus stablecoin that are backed one-on-one by some kind of asset versus stablecoin that are backed one-on-one by treasury bills or something close to that. Because it's all started with curve in a sense. And what's interesting is that the early swappers, they all went to USDC. So that just really tells you a little bit in a stress market what's being favored or this kind of stablecoin. So yeah, maybe some thoughts is really around risk management and just having the risk management framework before clear as a way to help us really flag early risks.
Yeah, I think for me as well, I think it was so notable from this event, like how important curve pools are for liquidity in the market in general. So someone asked, like, what can you look for in the future? My view is to have like a lot more of a keen eye on these curve pools because we can see how much like of a significant part they were to this whole event. So like Barkin said earlier, you can set smart alerts and keep a like good track of the liquidity pools, and then you can see when things start to see like start to become off balance. Barkin says, yeah, about smart alerts again. Yeah, but for the question in general, Louisa, Yongli, Aurelie, what would you do? Like, what are your lessons personally from this report? Like, how would you now approach, I guess, stable coins, but how would you approach things differently, like yourself? Is there things that you'll now look at more, or yeah?
Yeah, I think for me, diversification is a really important factor for me right now. So previously, I would like to sit in stables, and UST would have been my preferred choice because of the anchor yield, right? But on hindsight, I'm glad that I didn't all in stables in UST because that could have been a really painful loss. Yeah, on the topic of smart alerts, I think there was one of our members, alpha members, that actually saved tens of millions of dollars thanks to our smart alerts because they noticed that a lot of funds were actually being withdrawn from curve pools. So that was something that would like to highlight.
Anything from you too?
Yeah, for me, it's risk management. It feels like we were focused when there was era of easy money, we were focused on yield and return, the 20%. But then just really asking ourselves, where does the 20% come from? And having risk management tools in place, could be with smart alerts, could be with sizing your risk, how much you put into that, could be with diversification. So it feels like we are entering an era where there would be much more, accent around that part at least in DeFi or in crypto, around this risk management metrics.
Yeah, and we did actually speak. I think it was last episode of Office Hours. I spoke with Alberto, and then the one before, we also spoke with Nelson about like diversification across stablecoins, of course, but also just like across chains. So you're not so vulnerable to just this one chain like completely wiping your portfolio out. So if you do want to look at that as well, go back to the last two episodes because we did go through like the types of stables you could go into, and we also had a look last week at like the stables that people are going into at the moment, and then also what they're doing with it. And I think it's important for that situation as well. Through Nansen, you can kind of track when they redeploy their stables. And I think especially in this kind of market at the moment where we're in this downturn, it can be really important to kind of see what people are accumulating, but also when they're kind of redeploying. Because if you look at the moment, it might seem boring that everyone's in stables, but hopefully there'll be a time when that's not true, and you want to be kind of there at the forefront when that happens. You don't want to be behind it. So yeah, Nansen is a very good tool for that. But again, it's kind of the beauty of on-chain data. So yeah, Louisa, anything?
I think when we were doing this report, what it really questioned was a lot of assumptions made when we, I guess a lot of assumptions market participants made about stable coins. I think I'm not sure how many of you feel, but I remember sort of watching the DPEG event, and I think at the back of my mind, I have to admit I was guilty. I almost thought, oh, it's too big to fail. It will bounce back up, because there's so many smart money involved.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we did the actual analysis and understanding how vulnerable the protocol is just by looking at what happened on the curve swap pools, I think that was quite sobering, and it sort of grounds you to the reality of what the market is. And I think what Aurelie mentioned was really poignant, is that the market sentiment has changed, market condition have changed. I think perhaps something that we may all be guilty at certain points of the time participating in the crypto market is we can be detached from macro reality. And I think this analysis sort of brings to the fact that it makes a lot of us question the assumption we make when we interact with a certain protocol. So I think it's just keeping those assumptions in check, and like what Aurelie and also Yongli mentioned, perhaps being a bit more proactive in using tools available, or even information available in terms of risk management. And Nansen dashboard is actually one of the useful ones.
I think it's also maybe like an important point to make that you see these, like you just said, Louisa, there's so many big players were involved in UST. You feel like it's too big to fail. But like what I took from this report as well, and like we don't know if it was like collusion or whatever, but it does seem like there were a lot of big players like Celsius who kind of maybe were aware of the vulnerabilities anyway. So they were there involved. But they were so aware of the vulnerabilities that when they started seeing like it playing out, they were quick to react. So you can't just trust like, okay, there's these big people in there, I'm gonna go and do like all in, because these big people have a lot of money because they understand the market so well. They understand the kind of technicalities of everything, and they're able to be reflexive, which a lot of us aren't. And I want to make a point which is classic for crypto, but don't listen to influencers on Twitter or even the leaders of protocols who are saying that it's safe.
Except for yourself, no? Or...
Yeah, don't listen to me, definitely not. But yeah, don't listen to people on Twitter. You need to actually take time to analyze these things yourself, because like there were memes being thrown around or whatever, like we looked at saying, oh, people thought it was going to depeg, and then like 2 days later it did. So yeah, don't trust people on Twitter. Make sure you're able to kind of analyze and understand where you're making the yield, and understand the stable coins that you're actually using, because they're so different. And we do have a report out actually recently on various stable coins if you want to read that. And yeah, I think that is probably it. There's no more questions. So I will wrap it up. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, everyone, for listening. that is a wrap for today. So I hope you enjoyed this special edition. If you did, give the video a thumbs up, share it with everyone. Remember to subscribe as well, turn on notifications so you don't miss any alpha leaks. I'm hoping we do some more kind of special editions like this as well in the future. And yeah, that is it. So thank you all, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.